Season of the Haunted brought some amazing goodies, things like the Solar Rework, the Trespasser, and 3 brand new exotic pieces of armor. Today, we're going to talk about one of those exotics because I'm not sure what to do with it. The exotic I'm referring to is called the Second Chance, and in my humble opinion, that is exactly what it needs from Bungie. A second chance at the drawing board. Hello my fellow weirdos, how are you today? I know I'm a little late on the review, but I wanted to give this exotic an honest and fair chance by putting it through the ringer before I said anything, because something felt off to me. I also had a theory about this exotic after reading some reviews. I'm glad I held off because I think my theory's correct, but we'll get more into that shortly. The Second Chance Gauntlets are just like any other exotic. They can be farmed through lost sectors on Arm Day. They don't look very pretty. In fact, they look like we stole some hubcaps off a Prius, but I don't care about looks, that's not my issue. The exotic perk is called Myrmidon's Reach. That perk name is my issue. Gain a second charge of your shield throw melee, which becomes shield piercing and stuns barrier champions. It sounds fantastic on paper, right? I thought so too. This opens up the possibilities of being able to handle all 3 champions solo. I immediately started thinking about endgame melee builds because the shield piercing acts just like anti-barrier rounds, including going through Hive Knight shields and even Hobgoblin's little immune phase. Unfortunately, it doesn't work on Hydras, but it makes sense. I mean, we are throwing frisbees after all. Something else I need to mention is that both shield throws count toward giving us an overshield from the subclass itself, and this would normally pair nicely with offensive bulwark. But there seems to be some sort of problem with having 2 shields in Destiny. It's almost as if Bungie made this a clear-cut situation when it comes to either you have a melee or you don't. There's no in-between a second charge type of benefit happening here. What I mean by this is, if we weren't wearing this exotic and have offensive bulwark equipped, we can refresh the overshield timer and drop elemental wells with an uncharged melee and melee well maker, as long as we have an overshield. But when we have 2 charges from this exotic, it takes this away unless we expend both shields. So in a sense, it kinda kills that synergy of feeding our abilities from wells by forcing us to use both melees. It's the little things like this that kept throwing me off on this exotic, and that brings up the theory I mentioned earlier. I wasn't sure if I was missing something because it just didn't feel right. So I went on the old interwebs and the tubes of you to see what everyone else was saying. I didn't find what I was looking for, but I did notice a common problem that players were mentioning. The exotic wasn't performing well in 1590 activities when it comes to busting a barrier with the shield. They ended up having to throw both shields and rely on weapons as well, which kinda sucks. I didn't have this problem except for maybe once or twice when I first got them, but then again, I didn't get this exotic the first week it was available like everyone else did. So my theory is, this exotic performs based on our light level because everyone who reviewed it was on the low side at the beginning of the season. It's that or a bug. Either way, this raises some concern about Grandmasters and how the Second Chance performs in there. If it's based off our light level and we're only at the entry level to get into Grandmasters, this could be an issue. And if it's a bug, then we have a whole different set of problems to worry about when it comes to consistent melees, which we're about to discuss. We'll start from the ground up. We Guardians tend to stay further back from champions, and this can cause a real problem because the shield travels slow. By the time it reaches the champion, they already have most of their health back, and if we're relying solely on the exotic for barrier champions, it might be hard to keep them stunned. This is only amplified even more by the second problem I ran into, the uptime on a charged melee and the tracking. Right out of the gate, we run into issues because we only spawn with 1 melee. We have to wait for the second one to charge, and that's a bad thing if whatever activity we're in has a barrier champion right away. On top of this, there doesn't seem to be any real way to get our melees back fast. Normally, we can do this through conventional methods like heavy-handed and melee kickstart, but those mods don't work the same with this exotic, and I'm assuming this is once again due to us having 2 melees. Melee kickstart only works when we've used both melees, and I can understand this because it says when melee is fully expended, but who's using this one when we need the slots for champion mods anyway? Heavy-handed, on the other hand, only says while using a charged melee. It doesn't have restrictions like melee kickstart, and yet it still doesn't work how we want it to. It only procs if we have 1 melee charged and use it. So any melee recovery mods we might have are fighting with this exotic and not giving us real uptime on 2 charged melees. That completely defeats the purpose. This only gives us a few options like min-maxing our stats in subclass, using outreach on our class item, or relying on elemental wells for the 10% energy on well pickup. But I'm trying to be realistic here with how effective these will be when hiding behind cover trying to deal with a champion in a Grand Master. These mods alone are not going to cut it when having a charged melee is our only source to deal with barriers. This leaves us with the Monte Carlo, which I'm all for because I love that gun. But what happens next season if we don't have a champion artifact mod for auto rifles? We're out of luck! And to really add insult to injury with everything we've just discussed, the chances of us missing a melee throw are very high because the tracking is terrible. This exotic should enhance that, especially if they intended for us to use these in endgame activities. I have watched my melees go in between legs or graze champions and not do a damn thing. Talk about a feels bad moment when we're relying on this for a barrier champion and it goes through them. It's not a fun time. But despite everything said so far, there is a light at the end of this tunnel. Most of the testing I've done was solo, and that's what made it lackluster. I feel this exotic will shine a lot brighter in endgame activities if we have a fire team with some good DPS. I can't see a barrier champion needing more than 2 stun phases with a full fire team, so this will give us some time to recharge our melees before the next champion. So at least we have that. Where it currently sits, this exotic needs some love, and I mean bad. I can't help but feel like this was a last minute addition, but then again, I don't know what goes on at the Bungie studios. I think Titans got a little bamboozled with this one, because Warlocks and Hunters received 2 awesome exotics that flow with the Solar rework, and Titans got, well, this. Hopefully Bungie can redeem themselves on this one with the rework or an awesome broken exotic next season. Anything, I don't care. I had a build planned out for this exotic as well, but I decided to hold off because I want to test it with a full fire team, and I was also kind of waiting to see if anything gets mentioned in the TWAB first. If I could find a real workaround for this uptime issue, believe me, there will be a build video coming. On a side note, while I was making this video, my sidearm brother True Vanguard made a similar video about the PvP side of this exotic. I'm gonna leave a link for that in the description. I recommend you check it out because he brings up quite a bit about what's wrong with this exotic in PvP. It's a good video. I hope you found this helpful. If so, a like would be awesome. But more importantly, be true to yourself, be good to one another, and have a fantastic day. Thank you!
Take smoke, I'ma poke a hole through you, choking's overdue. Come at me and you won't get any older, dude. Crack your holder too. Heating up inside of me, blood so violently. Thanks for trying me. Now it's finally time to see how this rivalry becomes a dynasty.